Okay, well, we left off in chapter 49. We got through, I didn't block it in time.
I know.
Golly. His wheels are turning already. I can just see it. Don't say anything. Just go take your seat by your wonderful wife. No, sir. Yeah, just keep walking.
It's
I like this here, by the way.
So I basically confused everybody last week with the blessing of Ephraim. We spent some time with that. So Jacob has pulled together. He has adopted Ephraim and Manasseh now. He in turn has blessed them. Jacob got a little upset because he switched his hands on them, and Ephraim, the younger one, basically got the firstborn blessing out of it. So that ended 48. 49, he called all his other sons together in one room, and he starts giving them their quote-unquote blessings. I use that term loosely as we covered the first time, because we covered Reuben, which was not necessarily a great blessing. And then we covered Simeon and Levi, which was not a great blessing at the time. But we'll later on, as we get into Exodus and stuff, that you will see kind of how Levi gets changed a little bit based on their actions. But as of right now, I mean, his blessings are still legit. He says basically that they won't get any land, and they really don't. But we'll see what happens to them later. So Simeon and Levi weren't great. And thing to keep in mind, all the brothers are sitting here listening to everybody's blessings. And you're like, okay, the first three were not great. I just can't wait for him to come to mind. Okay.
Gotta get better.
Let's see. So where we're picking up is Judah's blessing in verse 8. Okay. So 49, verse 8. So let's read 8 through 12. Would somebody like to read that? Okay.
Judah, as for you, your brothers shall praise you. Your hand shall be on the neck of your enemies. Your father's sons shall bow down to you. Judah is a lion's whelp. From the prey, my son, you have gone up. He crouches, he lies down as a lion, and as a lioness who dares rouse him up. The scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor the ruler's staff from between his feet, until Shiloh comes, and to him shall be the obedience of the peoples. He ties his foal to the vine, and his donkey's colt to the choice vine. He washes his garments in wine, and his robes in the blood of grapes. His eyes are dark from the wine, and his teeth white from milk.
So before I open it up, this is Jacob had most to say to Judah than any other sons.
I brought a stranger.
Okay, fantastic.
Pick him up. He was out baptizing somebody with a bottle of water.
So Jacob has more to say to Judah than any of the other brothers. And he also receives a partial blessing. What partial blessing did he receive?
Scepter
The scepter, so the power.
will not depart until Shiloh comes.
Yeah, we'll get to that. Hold on. Okay. So, but what I want to get to is that the firstborn son, as I mentioned last week, normally gets two parts to the blessing. The first part is power. The other part is actual like possessions and things along those lines. But if we're paying close attention, Judah gets part of it. Who got the other part? Joseph through really Ephraim and Ephraim and Manasseh. So the firstborn blessing has now been split. Okay, so Joseph's side was not to get the power. This was Judah's side. And we kind of saw this leading up as we were going through and as Judah was taking lead when they were coming into Egypt and that whole story of returning to their father and, taking responsibility. So Judah was already kind of taking that role. Now Jacob makes it official. So you're going to have that role. Joseph is going to have the possession. Okay. And as we talked about last time, if we look at the land mass, Manasseh got the largest swath of land. You know, so they definitely had the land, the possessions, and things along those lines. What are some things that stood out to you in this blessing to Judah? Anything?
Well, it sounds like he's going to be a fierce warrior.
Sounds that way, doesn't it?
Really white teeth.
They had toothbrushes back then. And crest. Yeah, what else? I mean, you kind of talked about a little bit of the scepter thing. What is that referring to?
So the scepter will not depart until Shiloh. Shiloh is Messiah. When he arrives, the scepter left Judah. Until then, they had the authority to have the capital punishment, to execute the capital punishment. So when the Romans took over, when Messiah came in, like around 6 BC or 4 BC, that's the time they lost the scepter, and it went to the Romans, and they had to seek the permission from the Romans to do any execution, like even cross execution or whatever, So this is like a fulfillment at the time.
Yeah. Well, and it's a double fulfillment.
Yeah.
Because the Messiah comes, he fully takes the scepter. So it wasn't until Jesus comes that he actually loses complete. You know, so keep that in mind as well. Some people think now this whole Shiloh thing, it's kind of confusing to a lot of people because is it a person, is it a place? And it's debated on that. It could be both.
Because when Jacob gave this blessing, Shiloh was not even there in a map. It was formed later. That's the reason in Psalms he said, David sings a song, I would prefer Zion over Shiloh, and that's the reason, he makes Zion exalted before the mounds of Ephraim, because they were trying to rebel and kind of a mutiny over, that, they were leading the whole 10 tribes, so Judah being left over. So it's kind of he prefers, we know what God prefers, and that's the reason David time and again he ensures that this is the choice. So Shiloh cannot be that place. Shiloh has to be
A person.
What
which is
verse is
peace.
that in? Shiloh, I don't see it in my NIV.
It's yeah.
New King James, I found it.
It's Shiloh.
The scepter will not depart from Judah.
Until
The river scat from Tracy.
What verse?
10.
10.
It's 10. So here's the thing. So depending on which version you read, I've mentioned this several times, you need to read several versions because you will miss certain things. Because this whole Shiloh thing, it will take you down a rabbit hole. And this thing with Shiloh, every time that it's mentioned in Scripture, it's actually referring to a person. Yeah, because it's mentioned in Isaiah 8:6. It's also mentioned John 9:7, and every time that reference is made, it's being referenced to Jesus. So you need to allow the Bible to interpret itself. So if there ever comes a point where you don't understand something, well, what does this mean? Go find other references within the book. But a lot of times it will explain it to you. So here he is saying this is a person, and he's saying that it will not, the scepter will not part until Shiloh, which is the Messiah. So really, Judah does not lose full control until Jesus comes because he takes that scepter. He is the fulfillment. Okay?
The Septuagint's a little more clear on that too.
Yeah, do you want to read it? Just 10?
Sure. A ruler will not cease from Judah, and one who leads from his thighs until the things laid away from him come, and he is the expectation of nations.
Yeah, it's very, very interesting. I like the fact that it's important to know that what animal is Judah referenced as? A lion. Where does that come into play?
The song.
Well, if we go to Revelation, what does it say about the lion? You remember?
Who is there to open the seal?
Well, it's
Lion, the tribe of Judah.
there we go. Revelation 5:5. From this tribe, the Messiah came, the Lion of the tribe of Judah. So from Revelation, if we're paying attention, then it correlates right back to Genesis. So when we were going through Revelation, you cannot read Revelation without having understanding of Genesis. It's almost impossible to understand it completely. It's not the only book, but it's a major one. Okay? So we get the lion. He's going to be fierce. His brothers are going to bow down to him. And that actually happens. Numbers 2:9, Numbers 10:14. They're going to lead them whenever they go to battle. So they are a tribe that's a force to be reckoned with. All right? Anything else in there?
If they wash their garments in wine, won't they turn red? It says the branches, on 11, he will teach his donkey to tether his donkey to a vine, his colt to the choicest branch, and he will wash his garments in wine. Is this just?
It was white wine.
Well, okay, so do we take this literal or do we take this figurative?
It's a royalty, right?
Yeah, it's a metaphor, right?
Yeah, it's a metaphor. So there's a couple things. Royalty. They've got a big land they grew a ton of grapes. They were going to be very fertile in the area that they had. So it had a lot of different meanings. So really, wherever they were going to be blessed. Okay, and really, the big blessing was the Messiah comes from them. Okay, so anything else before we move on from Judah? What is the whole thing? The colt of his donkey to a choice vine.
He's gonna have so many grapes growing, he doesn't care if the animal eats them.
Yeah,
It's a reflection of wealth.
yeah, exactly. He's going to have so much abundance. They normally wouldn't tie a donkey to good stuff because the donkey's going to eat whatever it wants to eat. So he's like, look, you're going to be so blessed, you won't even care what the donkey eats. So, and they're pretty strong. Donkeys are. So that means the vine's going to be pretty hefty too. So donkeys are fierce, man. They're cute, but they're fierce. Well, then let's get to the next brother. One verse. Who's got this one? It's just one verse, 13.
Zebulun? Okay, Zebulun will live by the seashore, this is NIV by the way, and become a haven for ships. His border will extend towards Sidon.
Sidon, yeah. Okay. So what do we know about that?
Commerce.
Navy man.
Yeah. I mean, it's really about commerce. Now, what's interesting, if I remember right,
Between
okay.
Galilee and Mediterranean.
So it says they're going to live by the sea, but there is no sea next to them. But what's interesting is all paths that go back and forth go through them. So their commerce is going to be, is where they're going to thrive on. So where one of them might be grapes and production, theirs is actually going to be through commerce. And that's what Jacob's saying here. Okay? But it is interesting, though. They are between two big bodies of water. So regardless, the ships do bring things, so that he's not wrong in that manner. Let me see here. They were to be commercial ventures, merchants and traders dealing with shipping. So this is through their territory, they had one of the greatest trading routes via Maris, the way of the sea. It began in Damascus and would end up in Egypt. So everything went right through Zebulun. So Nazareth is in Zebulun, and the Jonah prophet was from the tribe of Zebulun. Just FYI. Okay, nothing bad was said about them. So anything to add there?
Well, it's kind of interesting that the word doesn't really mean shore. Like in the LSB it says shore, but if you look up the Greek or the Hebrew word, it means a haven.
A haven.
It's like it's a port or a trading place, so it kind of fits what you're saying.
Yeah, perfect, good, thank you.
Zebulun is in the Valley of Armageddon.
Whew.
See where Megiddo is there?
Yep, right.
Looks over the valley.
Yep. So, yeah, it's funny because I was telling Rebecca this, whenever we were traveling through Israel, it didn't even cross my mind to think about which tribe we were in as we were going through there. And I'm like, man, what a difference that would have looked at as I was walking through those. Okay, this was Zebulun's or this was such and such. It would have been kind of interesting. Now I got to go back.
Let's wait a little while.
No, they may not be there in a while.
We may not either.
Yeah, well, more that than anything. Okay, Issachar, 14 and 15. Who'd like to read that one?
I will. Issachar is a strong donkey lying down between the sheepfolds. And he saw the resting place was good and that the land was pleasant. So he bowed his shoulder to bear burdens and became a slave of forced labor.
So how do we interpret this?
I'm sure it says he's a raw-boned donkey.
A raw bone. So he's comparing him to a donkey. Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
They're they're very protective, like,
They're
when
strong.
they see a coyote, they see the true
Reliable.
character of a donkey.
But who's the burden?
Let me tell you, go Google a donkey attacking a mountain lion. Go to YouTube and do that search. You will see a donkey throwing a mountain lion with its teeth.
That's the reason ranchers put donkeys in their herds.
It protects the herd.
Yeah.
They are fierce animals. So anytime it's mentioned about a donkey, it's not a bad thing. They're just strong, is what he's referring to. Okay?
Don't underestimate the donkey.
Do not underestimate a donkey. But yeah, because if you have, like Dr. Egg's right, some of our friends have donkeys on their property to help protect cows or from the coyotes and whatever animals they may have. But they're docile until they get riled up. And then they're vicious. What else do we learn about Issachar? What is it saying about him?
They're going to become slaves, abandoned slaves.
Yeah, they will.
Mine says that he's strong but docile and lazy.
Lazy. Yeah, they will actually go the easy route is really what it boils down to them. They will settle for whatever they can, wherever it's going to be just easiest for them. Where did they settle? I mean, they didn't go very far once they crossed over the promised land. They're like, oh, this is good, kind of a deal. But that's their attitude. They prefer a life of ease. Okay, that's their attitudes.
And they will also serve, because there's a word called oved. Oved is also means servant or slave. So
Yep. So they would eventually submit to a Canaanite invaders, and they would fasten their yoke to them. That is what happens to them. That's the slavery that's going on with them. Within their valley, the valley of Jezreel, it's kind of all mixed up right around over in here. Their numbers, when we get to Numbers, and they start doing these census, you will see that their numbers actually grow. So they will actually survive and thrive to a certain degree. Their land is about 141 square miles. They're the north central area of Israel. Lots of battles were fought here, roughly 34. So it's an important land.
They're kind of in the middle. They've got a lot of different tribes around them.
Yeah, they do. They have what, 5? 4? No, 3. It's 3. Manasseh covers all this side, Zebulun and Naphtali. So this is the first 6 of the kids, and they all come from Leah. Okay, so he's breaking them in as the blessings. He's breaking them in by his wives, midwives. Okay, so Leah was first. Next come the children from the concubines, and he does Rachel later. So the next one we get to is Dan. Yeah. Then there's no correlation to you, Dan. So let's read 16 and 18.
Dan, you want to read
16 through 18.
Yeah, you want me to? Can you guys hear me all right?
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm reading from, I have the Septuagint pulled up, so I'll just read from there. So maybe a little bit different from yours. Dan will judge his own people, as also one tribe in Israel, and let Dan become a snake upon the road, lying in wait upon the path, biting the heel of a horse. And the horseman will fall onto what is behind, waiting for the deliverance of the Lord.
Okay, so who is Dan?
Samson.
Samson comes from this line. So he's named a judge, correct?
He's one of the judges.
So there's actually 2 ways to define judge. There's two words for judge. When we look at the Greek, or it's either Dan or din, or it's actually shofet. So how do we determine it? Shofet, it means someone who makes a legal ruling or is a leader or a decision maker. That's where we typically automatically go to when we say someone is a judge. That is not what din means. Here's what din means. Someone who receives a divine judgment against them. So he gets judged. He's not a judge.
Past tense.
Does that make sense? Which is not necessarily a good thing. Okay?
It doesn't make sense in terms of this translation. I mean, it says he's a judge of his people.
But when you look at din, that's how it's interpreted.
So it's
So-
both. Would it be both? What's the primary meaning of it? Would it be that he's the judge or that he is judge?
So where do we see him judging his people?
In the book of Judges?
Well, maybe through his descendants, but they are different. So we covered this when we went through Judges. How do we define those judges? They're not someone who sits on a court, sitting in a bank and hitting a gavel. They're pronouncing things, right?
And it says Dan will provide justice for his people as one of the tribes of Israel, so he provides justice. I don't know how it's still more simple than that. I don't understand.
Justice can be a condemnation too. It's not just a positive.
What are you trying to tell us, Ryan? That he's not the judge, he is judged. That there's some condemnation or judgment on him that you think is more important or is primary, right?
I think that him being judged is primary. There are things in him in his future where he does do some judging, and judges do come from him. But what eventually happens to Dan? Do we know?
First one to introduce idol worship to the whole Israelites.
Okay, not good things happen to Dan later on, which is why I tend to lean on that he is going to be judged, because what he does is not good overall.
He bites the heels of horses so that the riders tumble backwards.
Yeah, they're fierce, they're vicious, is what that's talking about.
Dan's a snake.
Okay, and when we go to Revelation and they're talking about the 12 tribes, Dan is not one of them. Who for the 144,000? And as I mentioned in a previous class, some people believe that the Antichrist comes from Dan. I will neither confirm nor deny that. I don't know, but that's a thought. Okay.
It says his rider falls backward.
Yeah.
Who's his rider? Is that other Jews? Is that other members of his tribe?
Yeah, don't know.
Stop from moving forward and go backward. I think there might be a metaphor there, right? But the word viper and snake, and it does imply demon, devil.
Might not be the guy you want on your team.
Depends on what you're trying to accomplish, okay? But here's what I'm saying. Now, I'm letting this kind of simmer a little bit, but when we get to Ezekiel 48, just because they're this way, this viciousness, they lead people to idolatry, all this stuff, Ezekiel 48 actually says that salvation will come to them as part of the nation of Israel.
You
Come on,
listed
man.
back in Ezekiel.
That's 2025.
Yes. Oh, is that when it's all going to happen?
Mine says, but
No,
Dan,
I'm saying it's going to take that long to get to that point in the Bible.
Yeah.
Just kidding.
mine says,
Yeah, we're not
but
getting
Dan is the first tribe listed in Ezekiel's millennial roll call of the tribes. This is a remarkable sign of God's redemption.
Absolutely. So, even though they're bad, and that's kind of where I was heading with this, even though they do all this stuff, they introduce idolatry, they actually go, depending on what map you're looking at, Dan will actually be up here far north, because they actually travel and start taking over some territories. So they do some weird things, they do some not good things, but God's salvation is bigger than all of that. Okay? So again, it's another thing that just keeps getting repeated through Genesis. God's salvation is bigger than anything that you could ever do. Okay?
When it says,
Prophet Daniel is so impressive in the Bible. And you can't really find any fault with him, but his name means God is my stronghold or my defender.
Yeah,
So
yeah, that's good.
positive stuff there
He
too.
wasn't from the tribe of Dan.
No, he wasn't from the tribe.
Okay, so Dan's territory right here, it was in the south on the northern edge of Philistia. Okay, so Philistia is right here. This is where a lot of stuff is focused on in our world. Okay, anytime you see this Philistia in the Bible, this is Palestine.
Gaza.
Gaza area is over here, but we take the Philistia, the Philistines, and just today it's the Palestine. So when you hear Palestines and you're reading in the Bible, they're one and the same. It just depends on who, how it was translated over time. Okay. Over time, though, Dan's tribe does diminish in size and importance. So God is not done with them. God has a purpose for them. Anything else in this one? I know it's kind of a controversial one, but it's good to read it.
And where was that in Revelation? You said the address for that. You mentioned something about it in Revelation.
Yeah, about the 12 tribes. I think it's Revelation 5. Is it 7? 7. Okay.
I think Dan, if I'm not mistaken, they couldn't conquer that land. Moses said, hey, go conquer the land. They for whatever reason, they refused to, and they moved north. If you look at your map at the very top, there's the city Dan. I think they settled way up there, is what it was.
Yeah.
Keldan is up there.
That's why there's references from Dan to Beersheba.
To Beersheba,
That's
yeah.
correct. Top to the bottom.
That's correct.
Yep. I chose this one right because this is the first one. Later on, depending on which one you'll see, that's why you'll see Dan up north. I'm just letting you know in case you do some searches and whatnot.
He's not listed in the 144,000.
He is not. He is not. No, Dan is not, and Ephraim is not mentioned in the 144,000, which we covered last week. Anything else? So one of the things I'll mention in Dan, which is very interesting when it starts off with one of the concubine's wives. In 16, it says, mine says it this way, Dan will govern his people like any other tribe in Israel. Does somebody else say something a little different?
Yeah.
It's pretty much the same thing. Why would he have to make the distinction as any other tribe in Israel? Okay, who was his mother?
She was a Gentile.
Yeah, and she was a concubine. The idea is that he didn't come from one of his main wives. So the brothers could have automatically have thought, well, you're not part of our blood because you didn't come from our mother, kind of a deal. And Jacob here is saying, no, because he's my blood, and he's letting all the other sons know they are part of the tribe of Israel. You are not going to argue about it. This list of next coming, they are part of this whole deal. So he made it very clear to them that they are part of his kids. Some people had some issues with that, so I was like, we'll cover it a little bit. Okay, let's get to Gad. 19. Who'd want to read that one? Come on, there's only one verse.
Gad will be attacked by raiders, but he will attack their heels.
Okay. So what do we know about Gad?
Not too much there.
No. But if we look forward, has anybody looked kind of at their history? Where did they settle?
Jordan.
Yeah, they settled in Jordan. They just said, we're going to just stay here. Kind of a deal. They're going to be consistently attacked as you read through Scripture. Okay? And mainly because they're over here in Ammon. They've got one whole side of them who is, with the enemy. Okay?
Don't they set up their own place of worship? In other words, they kind of create their own version of, of a place of worship. If I get that wrong.
Yes, you're right, but it was just a marker is all it was. They started to go to war both sides, but then they stopped.
But even though there's a lot of fighting going on, they will prevail. They're fighters. Okay, we really don't know much more about them. But who fights them over here are the Ammonites and the Moabites. So as you read through the scriptures, you'll kind of get an idea of when we start to see some of those, that's where they're from. And the Ammonites were actually descendants of Lot. So kind of interesting.
What's the metaphor with heels, that attacking them at heels?
So basically they will attack when on the run. So when the enemy starts running, they're going to attack their heels. So they're going to come after them.
I wonder if it was like from behind or...
Yeah, well, as the enemy's running, they're attacking them from behind, which that's the only way you can get to the heels. Yep. Yep. Okay? Because the way mine reads is Gad will be attacked by marauding bands, but he will attack them when they retreat. Okay, Asher, one verse.
Asher's food will be rich. He will provide delicacies fit for a king. You're welcome.
Thank you. And if we look, Asher, where's Asher?
Top.
They're right here by the sea. Man, they're going to have fruit. They're going to have fruitful land, and that's really what they're about. What's that?
Lots of dates.
Lots of dates. You know, and it was interesting because this is where Mount Carmel is. When we get into some other stories, that'll ring a bell. When we were on Mount Carmel, I looked at there's a ton of banana trees and lots of different fruits that are out in that area. So it's even still fertile today. Okay. But anyway, they will have much prosperity. They will desire rich food, and they actually choose to live a peaceful life. Okay. Some of this stuff I'm using because we know their history, so I'm just trying to bring in fulfillment to what's been said. Asher, verse 20. Oh, not Asher. Naphtali.
Naphtali is a dove set free that bears beautiful fawns.
So what does this mean?
Words.
Any ideas?
This is where Jesus did a lot of his teaching there.
In Naphtali? Yeah.
In the Sea of Galilee.
Yep.
Is Nazareth there too? I don't think it's on the map.
I don't think I went all the way up in there, but it didn't grab all the cities that are in there. So what does a doe let loose mean? Yeah, they are actually going to be very well. They would enjoy the admiration and appreciation of other tribes in special ways. We'll see that in Judges 4-5 when you read that. Their land is where Galilee is, where Jesus recruited most of his disciples and began his ministry. And it says, Isaiah 9:1, it prophesied that this insignificant land would receive a great light, which is kind of cool for them. Really, it's what we know about Naphtali. All right, 22-26. You had your chance to read one verse. Now there's more.
Joseph is a fruitful bough by a spring. Its branches run over a wall. The archers bitterly attacked him and shot at him and harassed him, and his bow remained firm, and his arms were agile. From the hands of the mighty one of Jacob, from there is the shepherd, the stone of Israel. From the God of your father who helps you, and by the Almighty who blesses you with the blessings of heaven above, blessings of the deep that lies beneath, blessings of the breast and of the womb. The blessings of your father have surpassed the blessings of my ancestors, up to the utmost bound of everlasting hills.
Hey, Ricky.
May they be on the head of Joseph.
You're going to wait.
And on the crown of the head of the one
Come back later.
distinguished among his brothers.
Thank you. Okay, so what's going on with Joseph? He's going to be fruitful. And we know that with the Manasseh and Ephraim, all that stuff that's already been kind of blessed. You know, he went through Joseph. Everything pretty much goes through Ephraim and Manasseh. He doesn't get any other blessings necessarily, but he is blessed through them, okay? But because Jacob knows he's not coming out of Egypt necessarily, but his tribes and everything are going to be coming after him.
I like the way his vine hit the branches of his vine will surpass him, which is a little metaphor there too. he's not.
Yeah. Correct. So they're going to be fruitful in many ways. His symbol here is a tree and of water. But he would be so fruitful that it would kind of overtake the walls, is kind of the analogy of what's going on. But he goes on to say, and he kind of goes back a little history, his fruitfulness, though, came at a high cost. He endured a lot of hardship, but he was going to be blessed through it all. Okay?
And he's gonna be like, the archers hate him because he's great now on slingshots.
Yeah, that's exactly right. But let me ask you this. Why was he fruitful?
Because he was so close to God.
His faithfulness.
Yeah.
It wasn't anything else, but it was his faithfulness to God.
His good character.
He stood up, for good principles of God, even in tough times. Even when it would have been easier to give in, he trusted in God no matter what. And he also held no bitterness toward anybody. He kept his emotions in check, and he understood that all things were part of God's divine plan. Sometimes we need to do that today.
Righteous.
Okay?
He was also given preeminence. So he wasn't the firstborn blessing, but he was given preeminence. He's going back to the original prophecy. You're going to be above your brothers.
Yeah, absolutely.
He's distinguished among his brothers. 26.
Absolutely. So since Ephraim may include the Gentile world, his fruitfulness of his tribes are just continuing. We covered a little bit of that last week. So, so his blessings and all this are still going on today, which are kind of cool. Okay? Anything else in there? There was interesting that Jacob used 5 names for God. He used the mighty one of Jacob. He used him as a shepherd, the Messiah, stone of Israel, God of your father, and Almighty. And he kind of covers the gambit of God the Father. But it's important that, though, the mighty one of Jacob, the eminent God, the Father, he uses the shepherd term, which is the Son, which is the Messiah, the stone of Israel, and then God of your father, and then Almighty. Kind of interesting how he kind of ties all that together through him.
Well, and he's directly blessed by the Almighty.
Yeah, he is. Verse 25, this kind of his future blessings of heaven refers to the blessings of the water for his crops, blessings of the deep. He will have springs and fountains, which is a major source for water for them, blessings of breast and womb, which he'll become very large. And if you go to Numbers, Judah typically is the largest tribe. In the second census, he becomes larger than Judah. So we do see his numbers growing in history there.
Mine says that he was shot at and hated, but he was so close to God. He was lifted up. But it says the idea that God's hands were on Joseph's hands, giving him strength and skill to work the bow expertly. God was there even when Joseph did not know it. It's so comforting just to think about. I mean, obviously, I think about that, and we know that he's always there, but he did so much even though he didn't know it.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
It's a good picture and a good reminder.
Yeah, great.
For all of us. Okay, last one, Benjamin. Benjamin is a ravenous wolf, devouring his enemies in the morning and dividing his plunder in the evening. Kind of a different look upon how he previously looked upon Benjamin. Because he protected Benjamin, he did all these things for Benjamin. Benjamin was kind of like, he was blessed when Joseph came in there with all the different stuff. And now all of a sudden he's this ravenous wolf. What's going on here?
Well, 2 main things that come to my mind about Benjamin is the first king of Israel came from there, and secondly, Benjamin almost was annihilated as a tribe in a civil war. It's hardly anybody left.
Yeah.
Because they're paganism.
Yeah, they did not turn out good, necessarily. Okay? Even though he was highly favored through Jacob, they did not turn out well. Okay? Although they did produce many warriors in Israel's history. Some big people came from them. You had Ehud, Saul, Jonathan, Esther, Paul, all came from Benjamin. Okay?
And he's where Jerusalem is property.
No, yeah, Jerusalem's within Benjamin, yeah. Yep.
I kind of think about how, he was, again, another favored son, maybe spoiled. you know, you see a child like that that's kind of protected and pampered and treated differently, then it makes me think, like I think of Absalom, you know, they just kind of turn out not good sometimes.
Yeah.
So,
No, you're right, absolutely. And if you want to go down and read kind of how bad Benjamin is, Judges 19 is a chapter to read.
In Judges 20:16 talks about how great of a sniper they are.
Yeah,
They
and
were good. They were left-handed men?
they were left-handed men.
Yep.
And that's why they were so good, because they were left-handed, because most people were right.
In spite of all the, you know, skill sets, Saul was sitting there doing nothing when Goliath came in. So it's from the tribe of Judah that took the slingshot and took the responsibility.
Yeah. Yeah, so I was going to go through Judges 19. You do that on your own. It's a very odd story, but it's important though. Anything else there in Benjamin? Okay, let's read 28. We'll move on. It says, "These are the 12 tribes of Israel, and this is what their father said as he told his sons goodbye. He blessed each one with an appropriate message." I'm going to just finish out the chapter. "Then Jacob instructed them, 'Soon I will die and join my ancestors. Bury me with my father and grandfather in the cave in the field of Ephron the Hittite. This is the cave in the field of Machpelah near Mamre in Canaan, that Abraham bought from Ephron the Hittite as a permanent burial site. There, Abraham and his wife Sarah are buried. There, Isaac and his wife Rebekah are buried. And there I buried Leah. It is the plot of the land and the cave that my grandfather Abraham bought from the Hittite. When Jacob had finished this charge to his sons, he drew his feet into the bed, breathed his last, and he joined his ancestors in death." So now we get to the death of Jacob. How important was it to Jacob that he not stay there? I mean, this is like the third or fourth time that he's actually, first he promised Joseph, he's like, "Hey dude, I need you to promise me, don't take me here. I need you to take me out." And Joseph's like, "Absolutely, I'll do that." Now he's telling all the brothers, "This is the plan. You're not going to leave me here. You're going to take me to this place that Abraham bought." And then he repeats it again and again. Okay.
When you're 147, you kind of feel like you don't have any control, and you can't, it doesn't matter, they're gonna do what they wanna do, you can't do anything about it.
Yeah.
When it promises and assurance.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is that land still located? Do they know where that is?
Yes.
And that, what's interesting, this is the only mention of Leah's death too. This one time, which is very interesting to me. So why was it so important for him to leave? We covered this last a little bit, but why was it important to them?
He wasn't an Egyptian.
Well, it felt like it was
God.
spiritual.
Yeah, it was a spiritual thing. If you remember what they were talking about, they felt like their spiritual side was, stayed kind of with their body, and then he wanted to be back in the land where his ancestors were, with his Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and all of them, and back with Leah. So, on the spiritual side, after they passing, it was important for them to go back, which is why they did that. Okay, he was 147. This is the where all the patriarchs are buried. It's the second holiest site outside of the Temple Mount. And
The sad part is United Nothing made it like, attributed to the Palestinians.
yeah,
There's nothing to do there.
yeah. So anyway, I just thought I'd throw a picture up there.
One of the good things is like Esau was not buried there because he sold the birthright, so he naturally got the eligibility to get buried there.
Yeah, that's good. Okay, he was 147 whenever he passed. And let's get to chapter 50, because now we're getting to the burial. Let's read 1 through 14. Would somebody like to do that? Because it's all one piece.
And Joseph fell on his father's face and wept over him and kissed him. And Joseph commanded his servants, the physicians, to embalm his father. So the physicians embalmed Israel. Now, 40 days were required for it, for such is the period required for embalming. And the Egyptians wept for him 70 days. And when the days of mourning for him were past, Joseph spoke to the household of Pharaoh, saying, "If now I have found favor in your sight, please speak to Pharaoh, saying, My father made me swear, saying, Behold, I am about to die. In my grave, which I dug for myself in the land of Canaan, there you shall bury me. Now therefore, please let me go up and bury my father, then I will return. And Pharaoh said, Go up and bury your father as he made you swear. So Joseph went up to bury his father, and with him went up all the servants of Pharaoh, the elders of his household, and all the elders of the land of Egypt. And all the household of Joseph and his brothers and his father's house, they left only their little ones and their flocks and their herds in the land of Goshen. There also went up with him both chariots and horsemen, and it was a great company. And when they came to the threshing floor of Atad, which is beyond the Jordan, they lamented there with a very great and sorrowful lamentation. And he observed 7 days mourning for his father. Now when the inhabitants of the land, the Canaanites, saw the mourning at the threshing floor of Atad, they said, This is a grievous mourning for the Egyptians. Therefore it was named Abel Mizraim, which is beyond the Jordan. And thus his sons did for him as he had charged them. For his sons carried him to the land of Canaan and buried him in the cave in the field of Machpelah before Mamre, which Abraham had bought along with the field for a burial site from Ephraim the Hittite. And after he had buried his father, Joseph returned to Egypt, he and his brothers, and all who had gone up with him to bury his father.
Thank you, sir. Man, if you really break this down, this was some funeral procession.
Yeah, sure.
Because it wasn't just Israel, it was the Egyptians too. Very uncommon. Very. So this just shows the level of gratitude, respect they all had for Jacob, mainly probably because of through his son Joseph. But they were very well respected. Keep this in mind when we fast forward to the next book, okay? Because it changes a lot.
Maybe they shouldn't have gone back so quickly.
So anyway, so we get this whole idea. So there's normally a mourning period. But Joseph has them do something to his body. What do they do to it? Embalming them. That's an Egyptian thing.
Not a Hebrew thing.
Not a Hebrew thing.
Orthodox today cannot be embalmed. They have to be buried just in a shroud, and they have to be buried before sundown on the day they die.
Yeah, exactly. So why this then?
Because he had a long ways to go.
A long way to go.
Absolutely. Out of respect. Yeah. Because it was going to take a while.
It's more like a state funeral.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, but also remember Joseph, because it kind of has these Egyptian things as well. But what I find very interesting is who does he have do the embalming or the all that stuff?
His own physician.
His own. And the physicians actually weren't the ones that normally did it. It was the priests. And it was the priest of Osiris who normally did it, and they did it because of religious aspects of it. Joseph was like, no, you're not going to do this because of that. You're not going to defile my dad's body. The physicians are going to do this. So he even made sure that nothing, religious was wrong or idolatry or another god was being used in this process. So he protected him through this. And I went through and wrote down the entire process of embalming. I'm like, should I go through it?
They take the brain out, right?
Yeah.
Through the nose.
Through the nose. With a hooked instrument.
Yeah.
This is a process that they took. Okay, we'll go through it pretty quickly. Body's laid down on a wooden table. The first thing they do is remove the brain through the nostrils with a hooked instrument. They remove the organs by making an incision on the left side of the body with a stone knife. Heart was left in the body, sometimes the kidneys. The organs were placed in a jar and preserved with a liquid called natron, made up of sodium carbonate. This is very interesting to me. Sodium carbonate, sodium bicarbonate, sodium chloride, sodium sulfate. Don't tell me they weren't smart people. The reason they did this is they would put them in there and it would preserve the organs. Okay, so we'll get to that here in just a second. It goes, then the liver, the lungs, the stomach, and the intestines are put in 4 jars and dedicated to the 4 genies of the underworld. Now, this is not what they did to Abraham or to Jacob. This is what they would normally go through for the embalming. So they would use these for the genies of the underworld. Next, the cavity of the body was filled with spices. The body was then submerged in natron for 7 days. It caused a rapid dehydration to prevent it from decomposition, which is why the body is preserved so well back then. The body is doused with pitch or gum, and the skin was anointed with resin. Body is then swathed with white linen cloth soaked in resin, laid in a mummy case. Then they cleaned up the shop, put all the tools they used for the bodies in jars, and they put it with the body in the tomb. That's how they normally did an embalming process.
Jerky.
What?
Jerky.
Jerky. Wow. So when you see the bodies, like when they uncover bodies in Egypt and things like that, when they're so well preserved, this is why. They were brilliant in this manner.
They thought that they were preserving them to live in the afterworld. They wanted them to be in good shape so that when they went into the afterworld, these organs would work.
Yeah, and Joseph knew how well it was preserved, the body, because he did have a long trek to go. Can you imagine not going through this process and carrying this body through desert and everything else, trying to get to the where they were going to bury it? Would not have been a pleasant sight. Well, yeah, that too.
Brain out because they think that the thoughts comes from the heart.
So they went through this process with Jacob. Who does Joseph ask permission?
Pharaoh.
Yeah, he doesn't even speak to the Pharaoh. You would think he would have direct access, but he doesn't go to the Pharaoh. He goes to his officials and says, "Can we do this?" And Pharaoh's like, "Absolutely." And you know what? I'm going to bless you. We're all going to go, and we're going to do this with you, kind of a deal. So then they go exactly to the tomb that they want to. I wonder, did Pharaoh go with them and all the officials to make sure Joseph came back? You know, I know it was out of respect, but he had been blessed because of him this entire time. And he's like, how easy would it have been for him to stay in the land of Canaan? So I just wonder if that might have, been part of it. But anyway, they bury him, and everyone returns to Egypt as we see in 14. So let's read 15 through 21.
Now, hang on.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
In verse 11, it says, now when the Canaanites saw this,
oh yeah,
it was like,
they were
important to Egypt, not to Jews.
Yeah, they were amazed at what they just saw. Yeah, and they were like, we're going to leave everything alone, kind of a deal. Yeah, so this was a big deal. Absolutely. Thanks for bringing that up. 15 through 21, let's read that. Somebody want to read it?
Then Joseph's brothers saw that their father was dead, and they said, this is amazing. What if Joseph bears a grudge against us and returns back to us all the evil which we did to him? So they sent a message to Joseph, saying, your father commanded before he died, saying, thus you shall say to Joseph, please forgive, I beg you, the transgression of your brothers and their sin, for they dealt evil against you. So now please forgive the transgression of the slaves of the God of your father. And Joseph wept when they spoke to him. Stop there,
no, you can stop there.
it's amazing.
I'm sorry, was that through 21?
No, I'm sorry.
Yeah, go through 21.
Okay. Then his brothers also came and fell down before him and said, behold, we are your slaves. But Joseph said to them, do not be afraid, for am I in God's place? As for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, in order to do what has happened on this day, to keep many people alive. So now, do not be afraid. I will provide for you and your little ones. And he comforted them, and spoke to their heart.
Okay. Before we sit here and say anything about the brothers, how many times do we go to God? Do you really save me from this? Or how much guilt did I have for something I've done in my past that he's already forgiven you for?
And we don't know whether it's true, whether Jacob did talk about them.
Yeah. Remember, Joseph is a picture of Jesus. He said it one time, and it should have been done. Kind of like us whenever we go to Christ, whenever he saves us. He has saved you from your sins. There's no need to go back again and apologize and for the same thing that you've done that you've already repented for. But we hold on to those things. It's that guilt within us that just keeps wanting to bring it out. It's the enemy, the devil, that wants to bring these things out in us to think that, hey, we're still condemned.
And Joseph was so sad they didn't believe him.
Man,
The pain that he
it
felt.
crushed him. Yeah. Okay. So very interesting picture. So what did they tie their freedom to, their salvation to early on? Their dad. Because the dad was alive, he's kind of protecting us, we're all good. Once dad dies, Joseph's going to come get us. So they hadn't put their faith in the right thing. They didn't fully trust Joseph in what he said. It was in something else. How many times do we place our faith in something else other than God? You know, so it's real easy to kind of look and laugh, but man, we do this so much. Okay? But it also shows you what guilt does to you. We've talked about it in the past. It is a nasty thing. You need to get rid of it. And you need to believe that God has saved everything, took the sin away. Okay?
They also showed their character of lying about what their father said.
Yeah. So, and that was interesting because I went and read several different people's ideas of that. The thing is, we don't know if Jacob did anything or said anything. I doubt he did. Okay. This was kind of their MO. They were known to do this kind of trickery stuff, to just lie and do all this kind of things. So they were like, let's concoct this plan to Joseph. Maybe he'll preserve us, kind of a deal. You know, so this is what our father said. So they're still putting their faith through their father and helping protect them. And man, I think that's what broke Joseph's heart. He's like, man, guys, I told you once before, God, what you meant for evil, God meant for good because of all of this.
And did the brothers go to Joseph and say, hey, look, our dad said for you to say that forgive us for the things we did?
That was what that's what the plan was. They said, hey, let's say our dad said this for us to go to Joseph and say, well, that's what he said.
They don't even go to them directly, they send them.
They send
Joseph was food about that.
Yeah, exactly. I don't think he was either.
I use that on my sisters all the time.
Oh, do you? This is what Dad said. So, but, you know, it does show us a picture of Joseph's heart like you see, because it tore him up that this is what they were still dealing with. He's like, man, I thought we were past this.
One piece of trivia, in the 76 years of Israel, there has only been one Orthodox Jew who was prime minister, and that was Menachem Begin. When he died in 1983, he died around noon at his home in Tel Aviv. By 4 o'clock, they had transferred his body in a shroud to the Mount of Olives, to the Orthodox cemetery, and put him in the ground before sunset, and 350,000 people had gathered.
Wow.
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 But that's how they got to get him in the ground.
They got to get him in the ground. Absolutely. That's interesting. That's good. Okay.
Strange that this book started with creation and ended with the burial.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Don't look past this. Let's get to the last part, 22 on. Let me read it. So Joseph and his brothers and their families continued to live in Egypt. Joseph lived to the age of 110. He lived to see 3 generations of descendants of his sons Ephraim, and he lived to see the birth of the children of Manasseh's son Machir, whom he claimed as his own. Soon I will die, Joseph told his brothers, but God will surely come to help you and lead you out of the land of Egypt. He will bring you back to the land he solemnly promised to give to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob. Then Joseph made his sons of Israel swear an oath, and he said, when God comes to help you and lead you back, you must take my bones with you. So Joseph died at the age of 110. The Egyptians embalmed him, and his body was placed in a coffin in Egypt. All right. So now we get to the death of Joseph. It's interesting that he wanted his own body because he knew he was going to be a long time. The idea of the prophecy of how long I think they were going to be in Egypt was probably shared with him because Jacob knew it because it was passed down to him. So they had quite a few years left before they were going to leave this place. And he passes this information on to somebody. It said he talked to his brothers. Now, he was one of the youngest of the brothers. So we don't know if it was there was probably some of his brothers. We don't know if it was all of them, or maybe it was just their sons. Maybe some of them had already passed, because he was 110. He was one of the babies. So they were even a lot older than that. Okay? But anyway, he does pass this information along, and then he promises, you've got to take my bones back, which is, I think, very interesting, because we do see that happen in Moses right before they leave the promised land. He says, I got to go get the bones of Joseph. And they go and grab them, and then they take them with them.
And he was not buried there.
And he was not buried there. In fact, there's Joseph's tombs. So, and it's funny that it's Palestinian territory.
Yeah, it's been attacked many times.
Yeah, that tomb was actually destroyed, and they had to rebuild it. Okay, it was caught on fire. So, anything else in there before we move on? Before we close it all and wrap it up?
Actually, we talked about the tribe of Dan, right? When we go to Genesis 14:14, Abraham went all the way to Dan. Dan was not even born at the time. So that Dan is like Dan Yan, which is like less, I guess. I mean,
I'm sorry. I'm trying to what are you connecting it to this or?
I'm not connecting to this.
Okay.
I'm connecting to Dan, the
tribe of Dan.
Yeah, we have seen the location Dan mentioned in Genesis 14:14, where Abraham goes and pursue these guys all the way to Dan.
Oh no! So that's a city.
That's tip.
Yeah.
That's just a city. Yeah.
So Dan to Beersheba also means that Dan that mentioned in Genesis 14:14 could be Dan Yan.
I'd have to go look at that. I don't know. I don't know. So.
And it could just be editorial hand in it, right? That happens a lot in the Bible.
Okay, well that concludes Genesis.
Hallelujah.
Absolutely. Now, before we log, why is it so important that we cover this book and read this book?
It's the basis of everything.
It's the basis of everything. Genesis, in the name itself, is the foundation of what we have, which is why this book is attacked more than any other book in the Bible. It is so important that we understand these 50 chapters for our faith than any other thing that's going on out there. Now, Jesus, don't get me wrong, what Jesus did and stuff, that's important. We need that. But the foundations of our faith, okay? Because here's what the book of Genesis covers. It covers the creation. Where did we come from? It covers man, gender, marriage, sin and evil, death, redemption, the heavenly realms, language, ethnic groups. All these things are covered. And when we look out in this world, a good number of those are attacked. Gender's being attacked. Marriage is being attacked. Okay? Faith is being attacked. Creation is being attacked. All of that is from this book. And 100% of this is correct. There will some that say these are allegories and just stories. 100% of this is correct. It happened exactly like this. And if God instituted these things, who are we to change them? Okay? And this is why I think the story of Joseph is so important as we come to the end, because he stood by God's grace, God's knowledge, God's understanding on everything that he did, even during the tough times. He didn't do it because it was, he could have been easier to go the popular route. He chose not to. And he was blessed because of it. We need to remember that as we go along in our faith, that we stand up for these things that were important that God instituted. No matter what.
One thing that has helped me, and it's just, it's really semantics, but it's not. When I was teaching the children a couple of years ago, and we started talking about some of these Old Testament, quote, stories, I stopped calling them stories. I called them events. Because stories can be made up. I mean, we've got the story of Red Riding Hood and the story of Jesus. We refer to them in the same way. And so, just in my own spirit and with the children, I began to say, this event, because it's historical. Just like we say the event, we don't say the story of the Civil War, we say the event. We know that World War II happened, it was an event. And so creation is an event. So,
Yeah,
and that's just a mindset thing, but it's helped me.
I did the same thing
Catholics
with
teach the
characters
young
and figures.
kids, like the
Yeah,
story
that's
of
good, yeah.
I don't call them characters.
Characters.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, they're people.
They call them Bible figures.
Yeah.
Well, I've got the story all the way up in the Baptist church too.
Okay, well, let me finish here, because here's some other things that's why it's important to cover this book. One, it lets us know who we are. We were created in the image of God. That is who each and every one of us are. That's what this Bible tells. That's what Genesis tells us. We were breathed. We have the part of God within us. How important is that for us to understand that we are part of Him? Okay? So we are His image bearers. We have a relationship with the Creator. It helps us understand why we live in the state that we live in today. Everybody talks about, why is there evil in the world? You know what? Go back to the book of Genesis. It's because of sin. God kicked man out of Eden because man sinned, separated from him from God. The rest of the book is about him redeeming man back to the whole state of where he wanted it to begin with in the beginning. Okay, so we understand where all that came from.
Why is man just not another animal?
Why is man just not another animal?
PETA would hate what you just said.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Okay? And really, it's the solution to most of the issues today. Okay? And this is in light of how God set things up. We know how marriage is supposed to be. We understand what sexuality is supposed to be. This whole idea with gay and transgender and all this other stuff, that was not God's plan. Okay? Who creates life? God. Not man, not anybody else. God creates life. We see that. This whole climate change and global warming, climate does change. God set things into motion. God is in control of this whole world. Revelation tells us how it's going to end. And a lot of times it's not how man tells us how it's going to end. We need to understand that. Okay? It's why Israel is God's chosen people. We need to understand, why do we support them? He blessed them in the beginning and said, they're my people. Who are we to say otherwise about who God's people are? Okay? It teaches us things about who God is. Okay, through this whole book, we have seen aspects of God's character, strength, power, trustworthiness, His love, grace, mercy, promise keeper. And He uses all things, even evil things, for His good.
It also talks about punishment.
Absolutely, He's a punishment God. Okay, we're going to get more into that later. It also speaks of His omniscience, His omnipotence, and His omnipresence.
Sovereignty.
And complete sovereign of God. Okay? Genesis, by understanding this, helps us understand things that are in the New Testament and even along the line of the Old Testament. Okay? Use it to help you interpret things. Genesis covered about 2,350 years of time. One book. Very interesting. In Jesus, what's interesting is Genesis 1 through 11, through the story of Abraham, covered 2,000 years. Genesis 12 through Matthew 1, 2,000 years to the coming of Jesus. And then now, which is over a little 2,000 years, we have Jesus to now. Very interesting. And we're not going to get into the gap thing. Okay. So it is a very important book, and this is why we go through it. This is why we understand it. It seems a little hard, but if we as Christians understand these things here, it helps us move along in our life so much easier in how to move on. The questions that this world throws and what the devil does to it is what throws everything off.
It makes Israel and what's going on there a whole different meaning. Like if you know the history behind it, it just has a different meaning.
It does. And as you're watching other people go against them.
Makes more
Yeah,
sense.
if you just woke up and saw the news, you go, well, that's wrong, but you back out and help you with the perspective. It does scarcely make you.
It also makes you realize that nobody's gonna walk in tomorrow and come up with a peace treaty to solve something that started from the beginning of time. I think you realize how deep it goes.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Yeah, it's like.
And if somebody does, watch out.
Watch out.
All the
Exactly.
prophecies make sense without understanding the table of nations, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot in Genesis. There's a lot we never even covered. We could have gone deeper in a lot of things. Just because we went through it in 6 months does not mean you should stop and not ever go through it again. Okay? Because there's so much more there. Prayer requests before we get out of here.